A note to you, dear reader. There are moments in life when we find ourselves at the end of a long road, wondering if we have enough strength for just one more mile. I've been there myself, more times than I care to count. This story came to me during one of those long and sleepless nights, when memories feel heavier than they should. It's about two people who had given up on laughing, on living really, until circumstance forced them together in the unforgiving landscape of 1882 Wyoming territory. Clara and Thomas didn't know they were broken in ways that complemented each other. Sometimes we need someone else's sharp edges to file down our own. This isn't a tale of grand romance or sweeping adventure. It's quieter than that, like coffee brewing before dawn or the sound of someone finally coming home. I hope it finds you when you need it most. Clara stopped bleeding into her boots somewhere between the 3rd and 4th mile, which meant the blood had dried or her feet had gone numb. Either way, she counted it as mercy. The Broken Wheel Ranch squatted against the horizon like something that had given up arguing with the wind. Not abandoned smoke leaked from the kitchen chimney, but wounded somehow. The main house leaned slightly left, as if favoring an old injury. Clara understood the feeling. She circled behind the barn, moving through the tall grass that whispered accusations with every step. 43 years old, widow, no money, no choices. The grass wasn't wrong, but it didn't know everything. It didn't know about the letter in her pocket from Mrs. Harrison at the Double H Ranch, offering twice what any cook should make. It didn't know she'd walked past the Double H's fancy gates this morning without stopping, and it certainly didn't know why. Through the kitchen window she could see him, Thomas Brennan, if the store clerk in town had given her the right name. He sat at a rough table, bent over what looked like a ledger, his pencil moving in sharp, angry strokes. Every few seconds, he'd stop to stare at nothing, then attack the paper again. The lamp beside him threw his shadow huge against the wall, a dark giant trapped indoors. Clara unlaced her boots behind the barn, peeling them off along with what was left of her stockings. The damage was worse than she'd thought, raw flesh where skin should be, blood mixed with trail dust making a kind of paste. She tore strips from her petticoat, the last good one she owned, and wrapped her feet tight. The pain came in waves, but pain was just another conversation she didn't have time for. She found the water pump and worked it until clear water ran. The cold shocked her, fully awake. She cleaned her face, her hands, straightened her dress as best she could. The letter from Mrs. Harrison crinkled in her pocket. Better opportunity. Easier work. Other women for company. But other women asked questions. Other women noticed things. Clara had been noticing things all her life, like how her father's medical bag got lighter each year as he sold instruments for food, or how her husband's cough started dry and ended wet, or how the bank manager's smile never reached his eyes when he explained about the mortgage. She was tired of noticing. Maybe that's why she'd walked past the Double H. Maybe she wanted to disappear into a place that had already forgotten how to look closely at anything. The kitchen door stood slightly open, heat leaking out into the cooling evening. Clara knocked on the frame. "Kitchen needs work." The voice came without its owner turning around. "$1 a week, room off the storage. No questions if you don't steal." Clara pushed the door wider, taking in the disaster. Grease coated everything like a second skin. Something had died in the corner, mouse or rat, hard to tell. The stove squatted black and cold, its pipe wrapped in wire where it had split. Flour sacks lay torn open, their contents mixed with what looked like coffee grounds and mouse droppings in a kind of hellish seasoning. "I can cook," she said. "Can you?" He still didn't turn. Last one said that too. Lasted 3 days before the hands threatened revolt. I lasted 17 years with a husband who thought salt was exotic. His pencil stopped moving. For a long moment, the only sound was wind testing the loose windowpane. You running from something? He asked it like he was asking about the weather. Are you? Now he did turn. Thomas Brennan had a face carved by wind and disappointment, the kind that had stopped trying to be handsome and settled for being memorable. Gray threaded his dark hair, more at the temples where worry lived. His eyes were the color of winter creek water, clear but cold. They studied her with the same attention he'd given his ledger, adding and subtracting, looking for the sum of her. Start tomorrow. Coffee at 4, her toilet black, no sugar. The hands eat at 5:30. You cook what we have, which isn't much. Questions. Clara looked at the kitchen, really looked. Under the filth, she could see good bones. Cast iron stove that would heat even once repaired, solid table beneath the scars, windows facing east for morning light. It was a kitchen that had been loved once, then abandoned to grief. She recognized the progression. Just one, she said. That piano in the front room, does it still play? His whole body went rigid, as if she'd pulled a gun instead of asked a question. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. How do you? He stopped himself, jaw working like he was chewing something bitter. You can see it from outside, through the parlor window. She couldn't. Actually, the sheets covering it made it look like furniture. But she'd grown up in houses where pianos got covered when the music died. She knew that particular shape of grief. I won't touch it, she said. No, he agreed. You won't. They stood there, two strangers who knew too much about each other without knowing anything at all. The wind picked up outside, rattling the loose pane like something trying to get in or out. Storage room's through there. He pointed to a narrow door. There's a tick mattress and blankets. Pumps outside for washing, privies behind the barn. The hands are Jonas Swedish. Doesn't say much. Miguel says too much, mostly in Spanish. And Pete young and stupid but means well. And you? The question slipped out before Clara could stop it. I'm the one who pays you. That's all you need to know. He turned back to his ledger, dismissing her. Clara picked up her boots. She'd need to wear them tomorrow, blood or not, and headed for the storage room. At the doorway, she stopped. Mr. Brennan. What? The coffee. 4 o'clock. Does it have to be good? For just a second, something that wasn't quite humor but was adjacent to it flickered across his face. It has to be hot and black. Good is for people who still have expectations. Clara nodded and shut the door behind her. The storage room was exactly what she'd expected. Narrow, cold, smelling of mice and abandonment. The tick mattress crackled when she sat on it, probably stuffed with last year's corn husks. She pulled off her wrapped feet, studying the damage in the last light through the small window. Tomorrow she'd have to stand on these feet for 16 hours. Tomorrow she'd have to prove herself to men who'd already decided she couldn't last. Tomorrow she'd have to cook in that disaster of a kitchen with whatever supplies existed. But tonight, for these few hours, she could stop moving. She could stop running from creditors and questions and the peculiar shame of a respectable woman with no respectability left. She could lie on this uncomfortable mattress and listen to the wind argue with the walls. Through the thin door she heard Thomas Brennan's pencil scratching at his ledger again. Such an angry sound, like he was trying to write his way out of something, or into something. She understood that too. The desperate need to make numbers add up to a different answer than the one life kept giving you. Her carpetbag held 3 dresses, all mended past respectability, a daguerreotype of her husband from before the sickness. Her father's last medical instrument, a bone saw he'd somehow never sold, $6 in coins that wouldn't last a month anywhere civilized. And the letter from Mrs. Harrison, already soft from handling. Clara pulled out the letter, smoothing it on her lap. Twice the pay, modern conveniences, a respectable position. She tore it in half, then quarters, then kept tearing until it was nothing but expensive confetti. Tomorrow she'd feed it to the stove, let it help heat that first pot of terrible coffee. Because Clara had made her choice the moment she'd seen Thomas Brennan's shadow on the wall, huge and dark and alone. She'd chosen the broken place over the whole one, the difficult man over the easy job, the ranch that had forgotten how to hope over the one that had never needed to learn. Maybe that made her a fool, but she'd been wise once. And look where that had gotten her, through the wall. The pencil stopped again. She heard a chair scrape. Footsteps to the window. Was he looking at the piano? Or passed it to something only he could see? Clara pulled the rough blanket up to her chin. Her feet throbbed in time with her heartbeat. Tomorrow would be hard, the day after harder still. But tonight, in this narrow room that wasn't really hers, in this broken ranch that didn't want her, listening to a stranger's grief scratching against paper, Clara felt something she hadn't felt in months. Not hope, that was too grand a word for it. Purpose, maybe. Or just the simple animal comfort of stopping, finally stopping, the endless walking toward nowhere. The wind gave up arguing and settled into a low moan. Through the thin walls, she heard Thomas Brennan pour something whiskey, probably, and returned to his ledger. The scratch of pencil resumed, steadier now, less angry. Clara closed her eyes and started calculating. 4 o'clock coffee meant starting the stove at 3:30 if it was as temperamental as it looked. The mice would have to go first. She'd need the storage cleared to make space for supplies. That grease would take lye soap and hours of scrubbing. The split stovepipe could be temporarily fixed with wire and clay. She fell asleep making lists, which was better than counting regrets. And if she dreamed of piano music muffled by dust sheets, of shadows too large for the bodies that cast them, of coffee so black it could dissolve spoons, well, morning would come soon enough to turn dreams back into work. Morning always did. Before we continue, please leave a like and subscribe. Let me know which city you're watching from. Now, let's get back to the story. 3:30 came like a slap. Clara's feet hit the floor before her mind caught up, the cold boards sending shocks up through her bandaged soles. The storage room held yesterday's darkness, thick enough to taste. She felt her way to the kitchen door. The iron latch burned cold against her palm. Inside, the stove squatted like something dead. Clara struck a match. The sulfur sting filled her nose and touched it to the candle stub on the table. Weak light showed her the enemy. The stove door screamed when she yanked it open. Old ash billowed out, coating her hands gray. She grabbed the poker, stabbed at the mess inside. More ash, chunks of clinker that might have been coal once. The grate had warped. Wouldn't sit flat. She wedged it with a piece of kindling, coal from the bin. Newspaper none. She tore pages from an old Montgomery Ward catalog, someone's dreams of better things. The paper caught, the coal didn't. Black smoke poured out, not up the pipe, but into the room. Clara's eyes streamed. She dropped to her knees, peering into the firebox. The damper rusted shut. She grabbed the poker again, hammered at the mechanism. Metal shrieked against metal. Something gave. The smoke changed direction. Mostly. Water next. The bucket sat empty outside. The pump handle felt like ice wrapped in rust. First pull, nothing. Second, a grinding deep in the earth. Third, brown water coughed out. Then clearer. The bucket filled. Her bandaged feet found every sharp rock between pump and door. Back inside, the coal had caught. And finally, orange light flickered behind the grate. Clara filled the coffee pot. Grounds measured by feel in the semi-dark. Too much. Not enough. The water went on the stove. Flour for biscuits. The sack mouse hold. Contents suspect. She sifted through her fingers, picking out the worst bits. Lard from a crock that might have been white once. Salt. The baking soda smelled off, but would have to do. Mix, knead, pat, cut. Her hands moved from memory while smoke still leaked from the pipe joint. The kitchen grew warm, then hot. Sweat ran down her spine. The coffee pot rattled. She pulled it back, too late. Boiled over. Grounds and all spreading across the stovetop in a bitter flood. The smell of burning coffee filled the room. Footsteps on the porch. Heavy, deliberate. The door opened. Thomas Brennan stood there with a full water bucket, his eyes taking in the smoke, the mess, her ash-covered hands. He set the bucket on the table. "The damper sticks," he said. "Should have mentioned." Clara's third morning started with the rooster drawing blood. She'd named him Napoleon in her head. Small, aggressive, convinced of his own importance. The chicken coop door stuck halfway open, swollen wood against wood. Clara shouldered through. Basket hooked on her arm. The hens scattered. Napoleon didn't. He stood between her and the nest boxes. Head low, neck feathers ruffled out like a threat. His spurs caught the early light yellow bone curved to points. One eye tracked her. The other stayed on the basket. Clara took a step forward. Napoleon's wings spread, doubling his size. The sound that came from his throat wasn't quite a crow, but wasn't quite a growl. Something prehistoric that raised the hair on her neck. "Nice rooster." Her voice came out higher than intended. "Good rooster." She reached toward the nearest nest. Napoleon launched. Spurs raked her forearm through the sleeve. Clara swung the basket. It connected with a hollow thump. Napoleon hit the ground, bounced up, came again, this time for her face. Clara grabbed the broom propped by the door, swung it like a club. Napoleon dodged, circled, went for her ankles. The broom handle caught him mid-leap, sent him rolling. He came up shaking his head, fury undimmed. "Jesus Christ!" Young Pete stood in the doorway, trying not to smile. "You're doing it wrong. You think—" Blood soaked through her sleeve, 3 parallel lines. Pete stepped past her, slow, almost lazy in his movements. He didn't look at Napoleon, just moved toward the nests, like the rooster wasn't there. His hand disappeared into the first box, came out with 2 brown eggs, then the next, and the next. Napoleon watched, head cocked, confused by the lack of fear. "Move slow," Pete said. "Still collecting eggs. Talk less. He reads your body. You're all tight and jerk. Makes him nervous." "He makes me nervous." "Well, someone's got to back down." Pete finished with the eggs, stepped past Napoleon like he was furniture. "And it ain't gonna be him." Clara followed Pete out, basket heavy with eggs she hadn't collected. Her arm throbbed. Through the tear in her sleeve, she could see the scratches weren't deep, but they were dirty. Chicken filth in the wounds. "Milking's next," Pete said. "You ever milk a cow? How different can it be from a rooster?" Pete's laugh came short and sharp. "Bessie's in the barn. 3rd stall. Don't sit on her left side, she kicks. Don't pull straight down. She kicks. Don't talk sudden. She kicks. You're learning." The barn smelled of hay and manure and something sweet sick Clara couldn't identify. Bessie stood in her stall, massive brown flanks moving with each breath. Her tail switched at flies that weren't there yet. Clara set the 3-legged stool on Bessie's right side. The bucket went between her knees. Bessie's udder hung heavy. pink-white skin stretched tight. Clara reached for the nearest teat. Bessie shifted, just a small movement, weight moving from one back leg to the other. The tail switched faster. Clara's fingers closed around the teat, warm, softer than expected. She pulled down. Nothing. Pulled again. A drop of milk hit the bucket with a tiny ping. "You're strangling it," Miguel's voice from behind her. "Like this." He moved her hands aside, demonstrated. Squeeze from top to bottom. Rolling motion. Firm, but not harsh. Milk shot into the bucket in a steady stream. The sound changed as the bucket filled metallic to liquid to foam. "Now you." Clara tried to copy the motion. Milk sprayed sideways, hit her square in the face. Warm, thick, sweet sour smell filling her nose. She jerked back. The stool tipped. Clara grabbed for balance, knocked the bucket with her knee. Milk everywhere, down her dress, pooling in her boots, soaking through the skin. Bessie's back foot came up, caught the overturned bucket, sent it rolling. Clara sat in the hay and manure and milk, her dress plastered to her body, hair dripping. The morning sun slanted through the barn door, lighting up every humiliating detail. Footsteps, slow, deliberate. Thomas Brennan's boots appeared in her field of vision. He stood there, looking down at her, and for a moment Clara thought he might fire her on the spot. Then his mouth did something, not quite a smile. More like his face couldn't decide what expression to make and settled on something in between. A twitch at the corner, a softening around the eyes. "Bessie's particular," he said. Clara wiped milk from her eyes. "I noticed." "There's a shirt in the tack room. Was my—" "It's clean." He walked away before she could respond. Clara struggled to her feet, dress heavy with milk, boots squelching. Scutty. The tack room was narrow, dark, smelling of leather and neat's foot oil. The shirt hung on a nail, blue chambray, worn soft, too big, but clean. She peeled off the milk-soaked dress, used it to wipe the worst of the mess from her skin. The shirt fell past her knees. She rolled the sleeves up, until her hands emerged. At the pump, she worked the handle until clear water ran, rinsed her hair, her face, her arms. The rooster scratches stung. Her feet had started bleeding again through the bandages. Everything smelled of sour milk. Evening came before she was ready for it. The hands ate their supper beans and salt pork and biscuits that could drive nails, then disappeared to the bunkhouse. Clara stood at the wash basin, scrubbing plates in water gone gray with grease. Thomas hadn't left. He sat at the table, coffee cup between his hands, staring at something that wasn't in the room. Clara dried the last plate, stacked it with the others. The silence stretched until it hummed. She poured herself coffee, sat across from him. The lamplight made shadows in the hollows of his face. He looked older in this light, or younger. Hard to tell. "Your shirt," she said. "I'll wash it tomorrow." It was Margaret's favorite, the color. The name hung in the air between them. Margaret, the piano player, the woman who couldn't milk either. "How many stools?" Clara asked. Thomas looked up, confusion crossing his features. "You said she broke stools. How many?" That almost smile again. 4, maybe 5. She had a temper when things didn't work right. "What did she do after the stools? Made me teach her every morning for 2 months. Spilled more than she collected for weeks." His fingers traced the rim of his cup. But she was stubborn. Kept at it until Bessie gave up fighting. Did Bessie kick her? Daily? Did she cry? Once, when Bessie stepped on her foot, broke 2 toes. He paused, lost in the memory. She milked standing up for a week after that. Wouldn't quit. Clara watched him remember his wife, the softness that crept into his voice, the way his shoulders loosened, just slightly, like setting down weight. "I'm not her," Clara said. Thomas's eyes snapped back to the present, to her face. For a moment, something raw flickered there. Then it was gone, shuttered behind the careful nothing he wore like armor. "No," he said. "You're not." He stood, the chair scraping against wood. At the door, he paused without turning. "But you didn't quit either." The door closed. Clara sat alone in the kitchen that still smelled faintly of sour milk and burned coffee and the ghost of a woman who broke stools rather than surrender. She touched the scratches on her arm. Tomorrow she'd have to face Napoleon again, and Bessie, and the stove that hated her, and 3 men who expected food that didn't poison them. But tonight, she was wearing a dead woman's favorite color. And somewhere in this house, a man was learning to tell the difference between what was gone and what remained. Clara stood, bones aching, and reached for the lamp. Her hand stopped. There, on the table where Thomas had been sitting, lay a small bottle, iodine. For wounds that needed cleaning? He'd left it while she wasn't looking. 3 weeks had worn grooves into Clara's days. Her hands knew the coffee pot's weight before her eyes opened, 4 o'clock sharp. The stove had surrendered to routine 2 chunks of coal, kindling crossed just so, damper 3/4 open until the chimney drew right. This morning, Jonas sat at the table when she entered the kitchen. Not unusual anymore. He'd started coming early, sitting silent while she worked. His presence filled space without demanding attention. Clara set the coffee in front of him. Black, no sugar, hot enough to scald. Jonas wrapped his gnarled fingers around the cup, breathed in steam. The kitchen had changed around them. Flour sack curtains hung at the windows, nothing fancy, but they caught the morning light, turned it gold. The stovepipe wore a collar of clay where she'd sealed the split. Mouse droppings gone? Grease scored away until the wood grain showed through, pale and clean. Bread today? Jonas's Swedish accent turned the words into music. Biscuits. Always biscuits. You complaining? No. He sipped his coffee. But bread, real bread. My mother made bread on Thursdays. Clara measured flour into the bowl. Her movements had found their rhythm reach. Pour, level, no wasted motion. The kitchen had become an extension of her body. She knew where everything lived without looking. Miguel appeared next, hat in hand. Another change. 3 weeks ago, he'd kept it on indoors. Now he hung it on the peg by the door. Same nail every time. Morning, Miss Clara. Miss Clara. That had started after the 2nd week, when she'd doctored his split knuckle without flinching at the blood. The respect felt strange on her shoulders, like wearing someone else's coat. Coffee's ready? You're an angel. Angels don't make biscuits this heavy. These are better than my mother's. Miguel crossed himself quickly, like apologizing to the dead. Don't tell her I said that. Young Pete came last, always rushing, shirt half tucked. Today, something bulged in his pocket. What did you bring? Clara asked. Pete pulled out 3 eggs, still warm, found Josephine's hidden nest, behind the feed barrel. Clara cracked them into the pan. The whites spread, edges crisping immediately. Perfect heat. She'd learned the stove's moods, how it ran hot in the morning, cooled by noon, needed coaxing by evening. Thomas's footsteps on the porch, heavier than the others, more deliberate. The men straightened slightly, unconsciously. Clara kept her eyes on the eggs. He filled the doorway, bringing the smell of horse and leather and morning cold. His spot at the head of the table waited. She set his plate down, 2 eggs, 3 biscuits, salt pork fried crisp. He ate without comment, but his plate came back clean. Cow kicked the fence down, he said to Jonas. North pasture. The posts are rotten, Jonas replied. Need replacing. After breakfast. The men filed out. leaving Clara with dirty plates and the memory of Thomas's sleeve brushing hers when he'd reached for salt. Such a nothing touch. But her skin held the sensation like a burn. She washed dishes, water scalding her hands pink. Through the window, she watched Thomas heading to the barn, Jonas beside him, their breath making clouds in the cold air. Miguel had started calling Thomas the boss who smiles now, though never where Thomas could hear. The smiles were rare, barely there, but Clara had catalogued each one, 7 so far. She kept count like he kept his ledgers. Noon brought its own rhythm. Sandwiches, thick with the last night's beef. Pickles from the jar she'd found in the root cellar, dated at 1880. Margaret's pickles. They tasted of dill and thyme. Thomas came back alone, unusual for midday. He stood in the doorway, something in his hand. Found this. He set a bundle of sage on the table. Wild sage, silvered green, smelling like rain and earth. For cooking, if you want. Clara picked up a sprig, rolled it between her fingers. The scent rose sharp and clean. Where? Creek bed, mile north. He shifted his weight, looked past her shoulder. Margaret used to. Stop. Start again. It's good with beef. I'll use it tonight. He nodded, turned to go, turned back. The biscuits. They're better. Same recipe. No, they're different. Lighter. Clara didn't tell him she'd started setting the dough to rest, giving the baking soda time to work. Small changes. Nothing worth mentioning. Evening pulled shadows long across the kitchen floor. The men ate beef and potatoes, sage perfuming the meat. Jonas actually had spelled. Miguel told a story about finding a rattlesnake in his bedroll. Pete laughed so hard he choked. Thomas stayed after the others left. This, too, had become routine. He'd sit with his coffee while she cleaned, neither talking, just existing in the same space. Tonight. She made tea for herself, peppermint she'd found growing wild behind the chicken coop. You had children, Pete's voice from the doorway. Unexpected. He'd come back for his forgotten gloves. Clara's hands stilled on the dish rag. Pete, Thomas warned. Just wondering. You're good with teaching. Patient-like. Pete grabbed his gloves, but didn't leave. My ma had 7 of us. Said it showed in how she moved, like she was always ready to catch someone falling. The kitchen walls pressed closer. Clara's throat tightened. Thomas stood, chair scraping. That's enough, Pete. I was just out. Pete fled. The door banged shut. Clara stayed frozen at the basin, staring at her hands under the gray water. You don't have to answer that. Thomas's voice came low, careful. No children. The words dropped like stones into water. 2 pregnancies. Neither took. She felt rather than saw him move closer, not touching, just reducing the distance. The second one made it 7 months. Her voice sounded strange, like it was coming from somewhere else. Small, perfect, blue. Thomas's hand appeared at the edge of her vision, reaching for something on the counter. The sugar bowl. Their fingers collided, his rough with calluses. Hers water-soft and trembling. Both froze. The touch held for 1 heartbeat, 2, 3, 2. Then both pulled back as if the bowl was on fire. Clara grabbed the salt cellar instead, though she needed neither. Thomas stepped back, then back again, putting the table between them. I should check the horses, he said. It's dark. They don't mind the dark. He left. Clara stood alone in the kitchen that smelled of sage and coffee and the peculiar ache of almost. She dried her hands, moving slow, automatic. The sugar bowl sat where they'd left it, innocent as ammunition. Through the window, lantern light bobbed toward the barn. Thomas, checking horses that didn't need checking, running from the same thing she was. Clara reached for the kettle, poured hot water into the basin. Steam rose, fogging the window. erasing the lantern's glow. When she looked up again, wiping her hands on her apron, something moved outside. Not Thomas. He was still in the barn. A figure near the chicken coop, too small for the ranch hands. Clara leaned closer to the glass. The figure bent, stood, bent again, gathering something, or leaving something. The lantern in the barn went out. The figure by the coop straightened, turned toward the house. In the moonlight, just for a moment, Clara saw a flash of calico dress, the same pattern Margaret wore in the photograph Thomas kept on the mantel, face down, but visible if you knew to look. The figure walked toward the kitchen door. The kitchen door opened, not Margaret. The mind played those tricks in the dark, but a woman in faded calico, thin as winter branches, holding a basket. Mrs. Brennan. The woman's voice cracked on the name. No. Clara's hand found the knife on the counter. She's gone. Oh. The woman sagged against the doorframe. The eggs. She always bought my eggs. $1 for 2 dozen. Clara saw it now, the hollow cheeks, the way the woman's fingers clutched the basket like it might fly away. Hungry, the kind that lived in the bones. Come in. Clara moved to the stove. Coffee's still hot. I shouldn't sit. The woman perched on the chair edge, ready to bolt. Clara poured coffee, cut bread, found the last of the butter. The woman's hands shook, lifting the cup. I'm Mrs. Holcomb, from the old Baxter place. She tore the bread into tiny pieces, eating each one slowly. Margaret helped when my husband took sick, brought soup, bought eggs even when she didn't need them. Thunder rolled across the sky, distant but building. Clara glanced out the window. Thomas still in the barn. How much? Clara asked. For the eggs? How much do you need? Mrs. Holcomb's face crumpled, then reassembled itself. John's medicine. $3. The doctor won't come any more without payment. Clara went to her room, dug through her carpetbag. $4 left. She brought 3 back to the kitchen. For the eggs, she said, pressing the coins into Mrs. Holcomb's palm. This is too much. Same arrangement as before. 2 dozen every week. Mrs. Holcomb's tears came silent, just water on weathered cheeks. She left the eggs and slipped out as Thomas's boots hit the porch. They passed in the doorway, her dirking away, him stepping a lot, neither speaking. Thomas shut the door against the building wind. His eyes went to the eggs, the empty coffee cup, the breadcrumbs. Mrs. Holcomb, Clara said, Margaret bought her eggs. I know. He looked at her then, really looked. You gave her money for eggs. We have chickens. Not enough eggs for what I need. Lightning flashed, showing his face in sharp relief. He knew she was lying. She knew he knew. Neither said anything more. The storm hit like a fist. Rain hammered the roof, found every weak spot. Water dripped through in 3 places. Clara set pots to catch the streams. Wind screamed through the wall's gaps. The stovepipe shrieked and rattled. Jonas burst through the door, soaked through. Then Miguel, then Pete, all of them dripping, steaming in the kitchen's heat. Horses are spooked, Jonas said, but secured. Creek's rising, Miguel added, fast. Thomas grabbed the whiskey bottle from the high shelf, poured shots around. The men stripped to their undershirts, hung wet clothes near the stove. Clara didn't look away. These were working men's bodies, scarred, practical, nothing ornamental about them. Cards? Pete suggested. No money till payday. Miguel said, stories then. Clara surprised herself speaking. My father called it earning your supper with words. What kind of stories? Pete asked. True ones, strange ones, the kind you remember. Jonas grunted approval. The men pulled chairs closer to the stove. Clara made corn dodgers on the stovetop, quick fried in bacon grease. Thunder shook the windows, rain turned to hail, then back to rain. "I'll start," Miguel said. He took another pull of whiskey. "My uncle found gold teeth in a steer's stomach, 3 of them. Human teeth." "Bullshit," Pete said. "Truth. Sold them to a dentist in Denver. $20. Miguel held up his hand like swearing an oath. "The steer was from a lot bought off the Crenshaw spread. Old man Crenshaw disappeared 2 years back. Everyone figured he ran off." "Jesus," Pete muttered. "My turn," Jonas said. His English always got more Swedish when he drank. "In the old country, my grandmother saw the wild hunt, riders in the sky during storm, dead warriors collecting souls. She hid in the church until dawn. That's just weather playing tricks," Pete said. But his voice lacked conviction. "She saw her dead brother among the riders." He waved. Jonas's eyes reflected the lamp flame. "Next morning, news came. Her other brother drowned that night, the exact time she saw the hunt." The wind howled appreciation. Clara poured coffee, keeping everyone's cup full. Thomas sat apart, chair tipped back, saying nothing. "Miss Clara," Pete prompted. Clara settled against the counter. "My husband fought in the war, came back different, but not how you'd think. Quieter, sure, but also careful. About strange things." She paused, gathering the memory. "We had a raccoon getting into the corn, smart one. My husband declared war, set traps, the raccoon sprang them, ate the bait, built a fence the raccoon dug under, stayed up all night with his rifle, the raccoon waited him out." The men leaned closer. Even Thomas's chair had all 4 legs on the floor now. "This went on for weeks. The raccoon got bolder, started leaving things on our porch, corn husks arranged in patterns, dead mice lined up by size. Once, my husband's own hat, stolen from the scarecrow, filled with fresh berries." "Like an offering," Jonas murmured. "Or a taunt. My husband stopped sleeping, stopped eating, started talking to the raccoon through the window at night. Long conversations. I'd hear him explaining battle formations, discussing Chancellorsville, asking the raccoon's opinion on Grant versus Lee. Lightning flashed. Thunder immediately after. The storm directly overhead now. One morning, I found them both on the porch, my husband in his rocking chair, the raccoon on the rail, sharing breakfast. My husband had his coffee, the raccoon had corn dodgers. They sat there watching the sunrise like old friends who'd finally made peace. "What happened?" Pete breathed. "The raccoon kept coming every morning for 3 years until my husband died. The day we buried him, I found the raccoon on his grave. It left an ear of corn and never came back." The kitchen went silent, except for rain and wind. Then Thomas made a sound, low at first, like something breaking loose inside his chest. His shoulders shook. The sound grew. He was laughing, real laughter, not the careful versions Clara had counted. This came from deep, shaking his whole body. Tears gathered in his eyes. He pressed a hand to his ribs like they hurt. "A raccoon?" he gasped. "Discussing military strategy with a raccoon." His laughter infected Pete. "Then Miguel?" Jonas smiled wide. Clara found herself laughing too, partly at the story, mostly at the sight of Thomas Brennan surrendered to genuine joy. "Margaret," Thomas said, still catching his breath. Margaret would have loved that story. The name fell into the room like a physical thing. The men went still. Thomas's laughter died. "She loved storms," he continued, surprising everyone. "Would stand on the porch, daring lightning to come closer. Said God was rearranging furniture in heaven." He stared at his coffee cup. "The night she died, biggest storm I ever saw, like the sky was ending. I wrapped her body in the quilt her mother made and sat with her till morning, listening to thunder. Seemed right. Her going out with all that noise. Nobody moved. The storm answered with a long roll of thunder. First time she smiled. Thomas continued, words coming faster now. I'd knocked her packages in the mud in town. Expensive fabric from Denver. Ruined. I expected fury. She laughed instead. Said mud improved everything. Made us all equal. His fingers traced the wood grain of the table. 3 months later, I proposed. She said yes, but only if I helped her plant a garden in that same mud. How long were you married? Clara asked softly. 6 years, 2 months, 11 days. Jonas poured whiskey around again. They drank to Margaret, who loved storms. The wind gentled to ordinary rain. I should go, Jonas said finally. The others stirred, gathering courage to face the wet walk to the bunkhouse. Wait! Thomas stood, went to the parlor. He came back carrying something wrapped in oilcloth, unwrapped it carefully, a deck of cards. But not ordinary ones. Hand-painted, each card a tiny artwork. Kings with real faces. Lincoln, Grant, Lee, Davis. Queens as seasons, jacks as animals. Fox, wolf, bear, eagle. Margaret painted these. He set them on the table like an offering. Winter project. Took her 3 months. His thumb traced the box edge where Mit B was carved in tiny, perfect letters. She'd want them used, he said. Pete reached out, stopped just short of touching. They're too fine. They're cards, made for playing. Thomas dealt. The painted faces spread across the scarred table, Margaret's art living again in lamplight and storm sound. They played poker with matchsticks for chips. The queen of spring beat the king of winter. The fox jumped the bear. Clara watched Thomas handle his wife's creation with careful fingers. Each card a memory, each play a small goodbye. She stood to pour more coffee and saw movement through the window. The barn door, which Thomas had surely latched, swung open in the wind. No, not wind. A figure stood just inside, barely visible, holding what looked like a bridle or a noose. Clara dropped the coffee pot. It hit the floor, brown liquid spreading across the boards. The men jumped up, cards scattering. Fire! Thomas already moving toward the door. No, someone's in the barn. Thomas grabbed the Winchester from beside the door. Jonas and Miguel followed, pulling on wet coats. Pete stayed, pressing his face to the window. Can't see nothing through this rain. Clara watched the 3 men splash through puddles, disappearing into the barn's black mouth. Lightning flickered, showing nothing, then nothing. Then a horse's scream cut through the storm. Pete ran out, leaving the door banging. Clara grabbed the lamp, followed. Rain soaked through her dress in seconds. Mud sucked at her boots. The barn loomed ahead, all wrong sounds coming from inside horses, thrashing, men shouting, wood splintering. She pushed through the door, chaos. Horses rearing in their stalls, eyes rolling white. Thomas trying to calm his stallion. Jonas at the far end. Miguel nowhere. Where's Pete? Thomas yelled over the noise. A groan from the corner. Clara swung the lamp that direction. Pete lay crumpled against the wall, his right arm hanging wrong. The shoulder joint pushed forward, making a tent of his shirt. His face had gone gray-green. Jesus Christ. Thomas left the stallion, dropped beside Pete. What happened? Sidewinder? Pete's voice came through clenched teeth. Spooked! When I came in, threw me! Clara set the lamp on a barrel, knelt in the straw. The shoulder looked worse up close, the ball of the joint sitting where it shouldn't, muscles spasming around it. Get whiskey? She said to Jonas. Clean cloth? Boiling water? I'll fetch the doctor, Miguel said, appearing from the back stalls. Doctor's 15 miles. Clara pressed her fingers along Pete's collarbone, feeling for brakes. Storms washed out the roads. "He won't come." "You can't," Thomas started. "My father was a doctor, Kansas Territory. I helped him since I was 12. She kept her voice flat, clinical. Dislocated shoulders, broken bones, gunshot wounds, birth complications. Pete moaned. The joint had to go back soon or the muscles would lock it out of place. "Thomas, get behind him. Hold him steady. Jonas, bring that whiskey. Miguel, find something for him to bite." They moved without question. Something had changed in her voice, her posture. This wasn't the cook who couldn't milk. This was someone else, pulled from years of watching her father work by lamplight on kitchen tables. Thomas sat behind Pete, arms wrapping around his torso. Jonas appeared with the whiskey. Miguel offered a piece of harness leather. "Pete!" Clara looked him straight in the eye. "This is gonna hurt. Bad. Then it'll be over. Do it." She poured whiskey over her hands, then on Pete's shoulder. He hissed through his teeth. Clara felt along the displaced joint, finding the landmarks her father had taught her. The process came back, muscle memory, older than thought. "Bite down," she told Pete. He took the leather between his teeth. Clara gripped Pete's wrist with one hand, placed her other on his shoulder blade. "Thomas, hold tight. Don't let him pull away." She rotated Pete's arm out slowly, watching his face drain whiter. The leather creaked between his teeth. Then she pulled steadily down while pushing the shoulder blade forward. "Nothing." Pete screamed around the leather. "Again!" Clara said. She adjusted her grip, pulled harder. The muscles fought her, locked tight around the displaced bone. "Come on," she muttered. Another pull. This time, lifting slightly as she went. Something shifted, then pop. The joint slipped back where it belonged with a wet sound that made Jonas turn away. Pete went limp in Thomas's arms, passed out clean. "Jesus," Miguel whispered. Clara kept her hands on Pete's shoulder, feeling the joint settle, the muscles slowly releasing their death grip. Normal. It felt normal again under her fingers. "He'll be fine," she said. "Sore for weeks, but fine." Thomas lowered Pete gently to the straw. His eyes stayed on Clara. "Where did you—" He stopped, started it again. "Your father, circuit riding doctor, followed the railroad camps, mining towns, anywhere that needed patching." She tore her petticoat into strips for a sling. "I was his only helper after my mother died." "How old were you?" 8 when she died. 12 when I started setting bones." Said Jonas brought a blanket. They wrapped Pete, who was stirring, mumbling something about angels. "He stays put tonight." Clara said, "Someone needs to watch him." "I'll stay," Miguel offered. "No, might need 2 men if he gets confused. You and Jonas take shifts." Clara stood, wiping her hands on her ruined apron. "I'll check him every hour." Thomas followed her out of the barn. The rain had softened to drizzle. They stood under the eaves, not quite touching. "You saved him," Thomas said. "I set a bone, that's all." "You took charge. We all listened." "Someone had to." Thomas turned to face her fully. In the darkness, she could only see the outline of him, but she felt his attention like heat. "My wife," he said. "She died of fever. Took 3 days. I sat there watching her burn up from inside. Useless. Couldn't do anything except hold water to her lips." Clara said nothing. "Sometimes silence was the only mercy. You'd have known what to do." He continued, "No. Fever takes who it wants. All the knowledge in the world can't stop that. But you'd have tried. You'd have fought. And lost anyway." They stood there, rain dripping from the eaves, the truth cold between them. "I'll make coffee," Clara said finally. "It's going to be a long night." Inside, she built up the fire, set water to boil. Her hands shook now that the crisis had passed. She'd forgotten this feeling, the aftermath of emergency, when the body finally admitted what it had just done. Thomas sat at the table, watching her move around the kitchen. "You gave Mrs. Holcomb your last money," he said. Clara's hands stilled on the coffee pot. "You don't know that." "I know you had $6 when you came. Saw it when you have fell that first day. Know you spent $2 on supplies last week. That leaves $4. You've been watching my money. I watch everything on this ranch. It's how I keep it running." He paused. "I'll pay you back." "For what? The eggs we don't need?" Clara poured coffee, set a cup in front of him. "Maybe you need them. Maybe you need to buy unnecessary eggs from desperate neighbors. Maybe that's what keeps a place like this from dying, not the accounting, but the unaccounted for kindness." Thomas's hand closed around the cup. In the lamplight, she could see the scars across his knuckles, the dirt permanent under his nails, the wedding band he still wore. "Margaret bought eggs," he said quietly. "Also quilts we didn't need, preserves we had plenty of, knitted scarves for men who had scarves." Smart woman. She said the same thing. About kindness being unaccounted. Clara sat across from him. The coffee steamed between them. Outside, Miguel's voice drifted from the barn. "Talking to Pete, or maybe the horses?" "I should check on him," Clara said. "Not yet." Something in Thomas's voice made her stay. He reached into his vest pocket, pulled out a folded paper. "This came yesterday." He set it on the table between them. "From the bank." Clara recognized the letterhead without reading the words. Same bank that had taken her house. "They're calling in the loan," Thomas said. 3 months to pay in full or they take the ranch." Clara's stomach dropped. 3 months. She'd just started to feel safe here, started to believe in the rhythm of days. And now, how much, she asked. $800. Impossible. Ranch hands made $30 a month if they were lucky. Even selling off cattle wouldn't bring that much, not with beef prices down. "I wanted you to know," Thomas said, "before you got too settled, before you started thinking this was permanent." Clara stood abruptly. "I need to check Pete." She left before he could respond. In the barn, Pete was awake, sipping whiskey. Miguel held to his lips. She checked the shoulder, swollen but stable, the joint holding where it should. "Hurts like hell," Pete mumbled. "Good, means it's healing." She adjusted his sling, made sure the knots would hold. Miguel watched her work. "You got healing hands, Miss Clara." "Just practiced ones." Back in the kitchen, Thomas was gone. The bank letter still lay on the table. Clara picked it up, read the formal language that meant ending, $800, 3 months. She folded the letter, left it where Thomas would find it. Her eyes caught his ledger, left open on the counter, the page showing this week's accounts. There at the bottom, in Thomas's careful script, "C laughed about raccoon." Real laugh. First in 3 years. Under that, smaller, like he was talking to himself, starting to forget what M's laugh sounded like. Clara closed the ledger. Through the window, dawn was breaking gray and uncertain. In 2 hours, she'd need to start breakfast, put on coffee, pretend the ground wasn't shifting under all of them. She turned toward her room and stopped. There on her doorstep, placed precisely in the center, a new pair of boots, woman's size. Still with the price tag from Harrison's store, the cost exactly $3. Pete's shoulder was strapped tight against his chest, the sling cutting from Clara's last good petticoat, 3 days since the barn. He sat at the breakfast table, moving careful, fork in his left hand like a child learning to eat. "Still can't believe you yanked it back in place." He stabbed at his eggs, missed. "My shoulder just grabbed it and..." He made a popping sound with his mouth. "Eat," Clara said, refilling his coffee. "Jonas saw the bone under the skin, said it looked like a goose egg trying to bust out." Pete finally speared the eggs. "Then you just put your hands on it and fixed it?" The other men sat quieter than usual. Miguel kept taking his hat off, putting it back on, taking it off again. Jonas watched Clara move around the kitchen like he was seeing something new. "Miss Clara." Miguel finally left the hat off. "My cousin's wife. She's having troubles. The doctor in town won't come unless they pay up front." Clara set the coffee pot down hard. "I'm not a doctor, but you know things. I know how to set bones. Birth is different. You said you helped your father with—" "I held instruments, boiled water. That's all." Not true. She delivered 3 babies when her father was too drunk to stand. Lost one. The small blue face still visited her dreams. Thomas hadn't spoken through breakfast. He sat with his ledger, pencil moving in columns, but his coffee had gone cold. The others filed out Jonas and Miguel to mend the fence, Pete to rest. Thomas stayed. Clara washed dishes, soap stinging the cuts on her hands from day after day of lye and hot water. Thomas's pencil scratched paper, then stopped. "Look at this." She dried her hands, walked over. He'd turned the ledger sideways, showing a page she hadn't seen. Not the usual columns of cattle and expenses, different categories. Laughs genuine, headed one column. Hash marks filled it 17 total. Smiles almost read another, 23 marks. Days without whiskey, 42 marks. Mornings waking without reaching for M, 5 marks, all recent. Clara's throat closed. She traced a finger down the last column. "You've been counting," she said. "Started as a joke. That first day. You said season with laughter. I wanted to see if you could—" He turned the page. More columns. Times Clara forgot to limp feet healing. 31 marks. Days Clara went without mentioning husband. 12 marks. Times Clara touched her wedding ring. Descended from 20 marks a day to 3. "You've been watching me. We've been watching each other." The truth of it sat heavy between them. Clara had her own mental ledger, 7 real smiles from Thomas. 4 times he'd said Margaret's name without flinching, 12 instances of unexpected kindness. "Why?" she asked. Thomas closed the ledger, his hand resting on the cover. Margaret kept lists, too. Shopping lists, garden plans, names for children we never had. His thumb traced the leather binding. After she died, I found them everywhere, in books, tucked behind picture frames, like she was leaving me breadcrumbs to follow back to her. Did you follow them? For a year. Then I burned them all. Couldn't stand the hope they gave me, that maybe I'd find one more, one she'd hidden so well it would take years to discover, one that would make her feel present again. Clara sat down across from him. The morning sun slanted through the clean windows, showing dust motes dancing between them. "So you started new lists," she said, "to prove I was noticing something besides grief?" He opened the ledger again, flipped to the back. "Then you came." The last page had only one column, reasons to keep going. Under it, a list. Coffee at 4 a.m., someone else awake. Kitchen smells like food again, not dust. Pete laughing, hadn't heard it in a year. Jonas talking more Swedish stories at dinner. Miguel singing while he works. Chickens producing more eggs. Clara talks to them, house feels occupied, not haunted. Morning light through clean windows, sound of humming while she cooks. Someone to sit with after supper. Not drinking alone, not drinking at all mostly. The way she handled Pete's shoulder, the boots she needed, the boots I could provide. starting to forget the weight of being alone. Clara's vision blurred. The first tear surprised her, hot on her cheek, then another. She pressed her palms against her eyes, but they kept coming. Months of held-back grief breaking loose at once. "I'm sorry," she gasped. Thomas's chair scraped. His footsteps came around the table, then his hand on her shoulder, awkward but solid. "Don't apologize. I don't cry. I haven't cried since your husband. No, since the second baby, the one that almost lived." The words ripped out of her. "I thought if I didn't cry, if I stayed strong, maybe the universe would see I could handle it and give me another chance." Thomas's hand tightened on her shoulder. "But it didn't. He died instead." The coughing got worse and worse until he was drowning in his own lungs, and I couldn't save him any more than I could save the babies. And then the bank took the house, and I had nowhere to go except here. And now they're taking this too. And I'm so tired of losing things." She was sobbing now, ugly sounds she couldn't stop. Thomas pulled her up from the chair, and then his arms were around her, clumsy but certain. She pressed her face against his shirt, tasting salt and starch. Clara, just her name, nothing else. She pulled back to look at him, this close. She could see the gold flecks in his gray eyes, the scar through his left eyebrow, the place where his beard was starting to silver. His hand came up, thumb brushing a tear from her cheek. The touch held, his palm cupping her face. She leaned into it without meaning to. "I dream about her less," he whispered. "That feels like betrayal." "It's not. How do you know?" "Because I dream about mine less too, and it hurts, and it's relief, and it's terrible, and it's necessary." His other hand framed her face now. They stood, caught between the table and the window, dust motes settling on their shoulders like snow. "Clara?" Different this time. A question. She answered by rising on her toes, closing the distance between them. His mouth was coffee and confusion, soft at first, then certain. His hands moved to her hair, pins scattering. Her fingers found the collar of his shirt, pulling him closer. The kiss tasted like grief and possibility mixed together, salt from her tears making everything sharp and real. Thomas made a sound low in his throat, desperate, and backed her against the table edge. "Boss, I forgot my Jesus Christ." They jumped apart. Miguel stood in the doorway, hat in hand, face red as sunset. I'll get it later." He backed out, nearly falling off the porch. Clara's hair hung loose around her shoulders. Thomas's shirt was untucked, collar askew. They stared at each other across 3 feet that felt like miles. Clara gestured vaguely at the dishes. "Right. The fence needs—" "Yes." Thomas left without looking back. Clara sank into a chair, fingers pressed to her mouth. She could still taste coffee, still feel the scratch of his beard. Through the window, she watched him head to the barn, walking fast like something was chasing him. Miguel stood by the fence, obviously fighting the urge to look back at the house. Clara stood, began pinning her hair back up. Her hands shook. 17 years since she'd kissed anyone but her husband. She'd forgotten the vertigo of it, the way it rearranged your insides. A knock at the door. Not Thomas's heavy step. She opened it to find a boy, maybe 12, holding an envelope. "From Mr. Harrison at the Double H," the boy said. He said, "Wait for an answer." Clara opened the envelope. Fine paper, proper letterhead. "Mrs. Miller, my wife informs me you've taken a position at the Broken Wheel Ranch. I'm prepared to offer triple wages if you'll reconsider. The Broken Wheel is facing foreclosure, as you must know. Come work for an establishment with a future. Room, board, and $5 weekly. My driver can collect your things tomorrow." Clara read it twice. $15 a month, more than she'd ever made. Enough to save. Enough to start over somewhere else, when she needed to. "Ma'am," the boy shifted foot to foot. Mr. Harrison said to wait for an answer. Clara looked back at the kitchen. The ledger still lay open on the table. "Reasons to keep going?" The last entry. "Starting to forget the weight of being alone?" She grabbed a pencil, turned the letter over, wrote on the back, "Thank you for your generous offer. I must decline. C. Miller." "Give him that," she told the boy. The boy ran off. Clara shut the door, leaned against it. Triple wages. Security. A future that didn't end in 3 months when the bank came calling. She walked to the table, picked up Thomas's ledger. In the margin of the last page, in her own hand, she added, "Reasons to stay? Just one, but it's enough." She closed the ledger, set it precisely where Thomas would find it. Through the window, movement caught her eye, not Thomas or the men. Someone at the property line, a man in a dark suit holding surveying equipment. The bank had sent an assessor. They'd started measuring for the auction. The assessor worked his way along the fence line, driving stakes every 50 feet. Clara watched from the porch, her hands white-knuckled on a dish towel. Each stake made a sound like breaking bones when he hammered it in. Thomas stood by the barn, still as stone. Jonas and Miguel had stopped working. Even from this distance, Clara could see the set of Thomas's shoulders, the same rigid posture from that first night when she'd watched him through the window attacking his ledger. The assessor was young, clean-shaven, suit too new, city boy playing at understanding land. He pulled out a notebook, made marks, measured again. Mrs. Harrison's carriage rolled up the drive. Clara's stomach dropped. Not now. Not with Thomas watching. Not with the assessor taking notes on everything worth selling. Mrs. Harrison descended from the carriage like visiting royalty, dressed for calling navy silk, buttons that caught the light, a hat that cost more than Clara made in 3 months. Her driver helped her navigate the muddy yard. "Mrs. Miller," her voice carried across the space between them, meant to be heard. "I've come to discuss my husband's offer." Clara set down the towel, stepped off the porch. "Mrs. Harrison, $5 weekly, private room with a proper bed, glass windows?" Mrs. Harrison's eyes swept over the ranch, cataloging its failures. "Indoor plumbing." The assessor had stopped measuring, listening. Thomas started walking over from the barn. "That's generous," Clara said. "It's practical. This place won't last the season." Mrs. Harrison glanced at the assessor. "Everyone knows about the foreclosure. Mr. Brennan should have sold years ago when he could get something for it." Thomas reached them, hat in hand. "Mrs. Harrison." "Mr. Brennan." She didn't look at him. "I'm offering Mrs. Miller a position, a permanent one. Clara works here. For how long? Another month?" 2. Mrs. Harrison pulled an envelope from her bag. "This is a contract, 1 year guaranteed, wages paid even if she falls ill, Sundays off." She held the envelope out to Clara. Heavy paper, official, real. "Read it tonight," Mrs. Harrison continued. "My driver will collect you tomorrow at noon." Clara took the envelope. It felt heavier than paper should. "Mrs. Miller is needed here," Thomas said. His voice had gone flat, careful. "To cook for a ranch that won't exist by Christmas." Mrs. Harrison's smile could cut glass. "I'm offering her a future. What are you offering?" Thomas's jaw worked. No words came. Mrs. Harrison climbed back into her carriage. "Tomorrow, noon, pack light. We'll provide work clothes." The carriage rolled away. The assessor went back to his measuring. Thomas stood there, envelope in Clara's hands between them, like an accusation. "It's a good offer," he said finally. "Yes. You should take it. Should I?" He looked at her then, really looked, and she saw it all in his eyes, the want, the fear, the resignation of a man who'd lost too much to fight for more. I can't match $5. I can't promise you anything past next month. I didn't ask you to. Then what do you want? The assessor was watching them, Miguel and Jonas too, everyone waiting to see which way Clara would fall. I want to finish the dishes, she said, and walked back to the kitchen. That night, Clara sat on her narrow bed, the contract spread on her lap. The terms were better than generous. A signing bonus, 2 weeks vacation yearly, even a small pension if she stayed 5 years. Through the thin wall, she heard Thomas pacing. 5 steps, turn, 5 steps back. The floorboards creaked, a rhythm she'd learned by heart. She read the contract again. Mrs. Harrison had included a personal note. You're too skilled to waste yourself on a dying ranch. Come work where your talents will be appreciated. Clara folded the contract, set it aside, pulled out her carpetbag from under the bed. 3 dresses, all mended past respecting, her husband's photograph, her father's bone saw, the new boots Thomas had left on her step, tags removed but paper still stuffed in the toes. She packed methodically, folded each dress with tissue paper she'd saved from town, wrapped the photograph in a dishcloth. The boots went in last, on top where they wouldn't be crushed. The pacing next door stopped. Clara pulled on her shawl, picked up the bag. Midnight by the kitchen clock. She left a note on the table. Thank you for the work. The coffee should be ready by 4. See, the door didn't creak. She'd oiled the hinges last week. Outside, stars spread thick across the sky. No moon. She'd have to feel her way to the road, then walk the 5 miles to town, wait there for Mrs. Harrison's driver. Her feet knew the path to the gate. Weeks of walking to the chicken coop, the pump, the garden plot she'd started but wouldn't see bloom. Going somewhere. Thomas stood by the barn, a shadow against shadows. He struck a match, lit a cigarette. The flame showed his face for a moment, hollow-eyed, unsurprised. Mrs. Harrison's driver is collecting me. At midnight, at noon, from town. That's a long walk in the dark. I walked further. He drew on the cigarette, the ember bright, then fading. I found your note. Clara shifted the bag to her other hand. The coffee. I don't give a damn about coffee. The words hung between them. Thomas dropped the cigarette, ground it under his boot. Say something, Clara said. What's to say? It's a good offer. You'd be a fool not to take it. Then I'm a fool. No, you're practical, smart, everything I'm not. Thomas, I've been building something. The words came fast, like he was afraid he'd stop if he slowed down. Behind the house. Started it 2 weeks ago. Clara set down her bag. Building what? A room, addition to the house, proper windows, wood floor. He pulled papers from his pocket, unfolded them. Plans sketched on the back of feed store receipts. A kitchen entrance, so you wouldn't have to go outside. Your own door to the garden. Clara took the papers, held them up to catch starlight. The sketches were careful, detailed. A real room, not servants' quarters. Part of the house proper. Why? She asked. You know why. Say it. Thomas took the papers back, folded them precisely. Because I can't pay you $5. Can't promise you safety. Can't even promise the ranch will exist past Christmas. He looked at her straight on. But I can build you a room, your own space. Not the storage closet, not temporary, permanent. However long permanent lasts these days, that's not saying it. Christ, Clara, what do you want from me? The truth. The truth. He stepped closer. The truth is, I count the hours until 4 o'clock coffee. The truth is, this house works again because you're in it. The truth is, I started that room the day after you fixed Pete's shoulder because I realized I couldn't watch you leave. That's still not, I need you. The words ripped out of him. Not the ranch, not the cooking. Me, I need you here. I have needed you since that first morning, when you burned the coffee and didn't apologize, since you named that damned rooster Napoleon, since you gave Mrs. Holcomb your last dollars. His voice dropped. Since you cried in my kitchen about babies that didn't live, and I wanted to take every hurt you'd ever had and carry it myself. Clara couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The bag handle cut into her palm. But I can't offer you anything except a half-built room and a failing ranch and whatever time we have before the bank takes it all. Thomas. Take the job, Clara. Take the security. Take the future that makes sense. Clara dropped the bag, stepped forward until she could smell the tobacco on him, the soap he used, the particular scent of grief and hope mixed together. I already turned it down. What? This afternoon, while you were in the barn, sent the contract back with no thank you written across it? Thomas stared. But your bag? I was leaving because I'm a coward, because staying means admitting I want things I might not get to keep. She touched his face, felt the stubble, the warmth, because I'd rather run than watch another thing I care about disappear. Clara. But I'm tired of running, tired of being practical, tired of pretending I don't wake up listening for your footsteps. Thomas pulled her against him, her face pressed to his chest. She could hear his heart racing. The bank will take it all, he said into her hair. Maybe. We'll have nowhere to go. We'll have each other. That's not enough. It's everything. He pulled back to look at her. You're sure? Show me the room. He took her hand, led her behind the house. In the starlight, she could see the framing. True 2x4s, not scrap lumber. The foundation already poured, window openings facing east for morning sun. It's small, he said. It's perfect. The roof's not on. It will be. Clara. He turned her to face him. What if I can't save the ranch? What if we lose everything? Then we lose it together. He kissed her, said, different from the kitchen, desperate and careful at once, like holding water in cupped palms, like trying to stop time through will alone. When they broke apart, Clara saw movement by the gate, the assessor's carriage, but not empty 3 men inside. And they were carrying torches. Thomas? She grabbed his arm. They're going to burn us out. The first torch sailed through the air, landing in the hayfield they'd just cut. Smoke began to rise. Thomas grabbed the water bucket by the door, ran toward the hayfield. Clara followed, her skirts catching on her legs. The torch had landed in the stubble dry from weeks without rain. Smoke thickened, orange tongues spreading outward in a circle. Fire! Thomas's shout cracked through the night. The bunkhouse door burst open, Jonas first, then Miguel, both in their union suits, feet bare. Pete came last, one arm still strapped but moving fast. Bucket line! Jonas already heading for the pump. Clara ran to the kitchen, grabbed every pot, pan, anything that would hold water. The smoke reached the house now, acrid, making her eyes stream. The assessor's carriage hadn't moved. 3 figures stood beside it, watching, not helping, just watching. Miguel worked the pump while Jonas ran buckets. Pete, one-handed, threw dishwater from the kitchen onto smaller flames. Clara beat at the edges with wet burlap, the heat searing her face. It's spreading too fast, Miguel's voice high with panic. Then hoofbeats, lots of them. Harrison from the Double H came first, 12 men behind him. They leaped from horses before stopping, buckets in hand. Mrs. Holcomb's wagon rattled up, her husband and 3 boys jumping out, the Sawyer family from 2 spreads over, the Krugers, the Johnsons. 30 people formed a line from pump to fire. Buckets passed hand to hand, water hitting flames with hissing steam. Clara found herself between Mrs. Harrison, who'd somehow appeared in a nightdress, and Boots and Thomas. "Did you see who?" Mrs. Harrison asked, passing buckets. "The assessor's carriage." Clara pointed. The 3 men had vanished. Carriage gone. The fire fought back, jumped the fire break, caught the fence posts. Thomas left the line, grabbed an axe, started cutting the fence ahead of the flames, taking away its fuel. An hour, maybe more. Clara's hands blistered from the bucket handles, her throat raw from smoke. But the circle of black grew larger than the circle of orange. Then the orange shrank to spots. Then embers. Then nothing but smoke and the smell of char. Everyone stood panting, faces soot black and clothes ruined. Harrison spoke first. "Assessors trying to drop the property value. Damaged goods sell cheaper at auction." "That's illegal," someone said. "Prove it." Thomas walked through the burned field, boots crunching on blackened stubble. He stopped in the center, picked up something, a torch handle, store-bought, with a price tag still attached. From Harrison's own store. "Son of a bitch," Harrison muttered. "That's from my stock. Sold 3 yesterday to—" He stopped. "To the bank assessor, like I said." Thomas dropped the handle. "Prove it." Mrs. Harrison wrung soot from her nightdress hem. "John, we're calling an emergency town meeting. Tomorrow." "Elizabeth." "Don't Elizabeth me. They burn one ranch to force a sale. They'll burn others." She looked around at the gathered neighbors. "We all have loans with that bank." Nods all around. Worried faces in the dying light of dawn. 9 o'clock, Mrs. Harrison continued. "Bring your loan papers, all of them." The neighbors dispersed slowly, checking the field edges for embers. Clara and Thomas stood alone in the ruined hayfield. "That was a quarter of our winter feed," Thomas said quietly. "We'll manage." "With what?" Clara didn't answer. Couldn't. The math was too brutal. 3 months later. Clara pulled the 4th turkey from the oven, skin crackling golden. The kitchen had expanded into the main house. Tables borrowed from 3 neighbors, making one long line from kitchen through parlor. 40 people, maybe more, voices overlapping like instruments warming up. "Miss Clara?" Little Jenny Harrison tugged her apron. "Show us the candy pulling again." Clara set the turkey on the warming shelf. Jonas had built it special for today and gathered the children around the stove. The molasses had been boiling for an hour, dark and glossy, ready to pull. "Butter your hands," she told them. 7 pairs of small hands reached for the butter dish. "Now, watch." She poured the molasses onto the oiled marble slab Thomas had found in the old Baxter ruins. Let it cool just enough to handle. Then showed them how to pull, stretch, fold, stretch, fold. The candy lightening from dark brown to gold. My turn. Pete's nephew grabbed a portion, pulled too hard. It snapped, sending him backward into his mother's skirts. Laughter rippled through the kitchen. Thomas appeared in the doorway, wearing his good shirt, the one Clara had mended twice, pressed this morning with the heavy iron. He watched her with the children, something soft in his expression. "Folks are asking for you," he said. Clara wiped her hands, retied her apron. The parlor overflowed with neighbors, the same ones who'd fought the fire, who'd come to the town meeting, who'd discovered together that the bank had been playing dirty for years, false assessments, manufactured crises, buying foreclosed properties through shell companies. The investigation was ongoing. The assessor had disappeared, but the loans had been frozen, payments suspended until the court sorted it out. The broken wheel had received a stay of execution, maybe permanent, maybe not, but today wasn't about maybe. Jonah stood, raised his glass. To the harvest, the harvest. 40 voices together. It hadn't been the best harvest. The burned field had cost them. But neighbors had shared what they had, traded labor for feed, found ways to make the numbers work, the way people did when they remembered they needed each other. Speech, Miguel called out. Boss needs to make a speech. Thomas looked trapped. Clara almost rescued him, then didn't. He needed this, the practice of speaking hope aloud. I'm not good at speeches. Thomas started. Since when has that stopped you? Someone called out. Laughter. Fair enough. Thomas found Clara's eyes across the room. Most of you know this place nearly died. Not the fire. Before that, after Margaret passed, He paused, working through words. I kept the ranch running, but forgot why it mattered. Forgot that places need more than work. They need life. Mrs. Holcomb dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief. Then Clara showed up. Thomas's voice steadied. Didn't know anything about ranching. Couldn't milk a cow. That rooster Napoleon nearly killed her twice. 3 times, Clara corrected. More laughter. But she brought something we'd lost. Not just food, though Lord knows we needed someone who could cook better than me. Amen to that, Jonas muttered. She brought the remembering that we're more than the work we do, more than the debts we owe, more than the griefs we carry. Thomas pulled out a document. Which is why I filed this yesterday at the courthouse. Clara's heart stopped. Partnership papers. Full partner in the Broken Wheel Ranch. Clara Miller. He looked at her straight on. If she'll have it. The room went silent. Clara couldn't move. Partnership meant ownership, legal standing, a permanent claim. Clara! Thomas's voice carried worry now. She walked through the crowd, took the papers from his hands, read them carefully. Her name next to his on every line. One correction, she said. Thomas's face fell. The name, Clara pulled out a pencil, crossed out Miller. If we're to be partners, might as well do it proper, she wrote Brennan in its place. The room exploded. Shouts, applause, Jonas banging a spoon on his glass. Thomas stared at the paper, then at her. Are you proposing to me? Someone had to. He kissed her then, in front of everyone, longer than proper, not caring who saw. When they broke apart, Mrs. Harrison was crying openly. Harrison himself cleared his throat suspiciously often. About damn time, Pete said, then colored red. Pardon my language. The party continued, neighbors, sharing food, stories, plans for spring planting, children sticky with molasses candy, Jonas playing his fiddle, Miguel singing Spanish love songs that made the married women blush and laugh. As evening came, people drifted away in wagons and on horseback. Clara and Thomas stood on the porch, watching lanterns disappear into the darkness. The bank could still take it, Thomas said. They could. The investigation might go nowhere. It might. We might be building something just to watch it disappear. Clara took his hand. Then we build it anyway. They went inside. The kitchen looked like a battlefield, dishes everywhere. Turkey bones, curd, spilled gravy, candy stuck to surfaces she'd be finding for weeks. Thomas picked up his old ledger from the mantel, the one with all his lists, his counting of griefs and joys. Don't need this anymore. He opened the stove door. Wait! Clara took it from him, flipped to a blank page, wrote at the top, ranch operations and other matters, property of T and C. Brennan. Under it, she added the first entry, November 15th, 1882. Fed 40 people. No one went hungry. Napoleon the rooster still an asshole. Kitchen needs expansion. See ya, pregnant, due June. Thomas read it twice, 3 times. His hand shook as he set the ledger down. Clara, June. You're sure? My father was a doctor. Remember, I know the signs. He pulled her against him, held on like she might disappear. She felt him shaking, crying, or laughing. She couldn't tell. Maybe both. It might not take, she said into his shirt. I've lost 2 before. Then we face that too, together. They stood in the wreckage of the kitchen, holding each other, while outside the wind tested the walls of the addition Thomas had finished last month. Clara's room, though she hadn't slept there yet, preferring Thomas's bed, the warmth of another person after so many cold nights alone. I should clean this mess, Clara said. Tomorrow. The dishes? Tomorrow. He led her to the parlor. Margaret's piano still sat covered, but the sheet was gone. Thomas had removed it last week, oiled the keys, tuned what could be tuned. Play something, Clara said. I don't play. Learn. Thomas sat on the bench, picked out notes with one finger, not a melody. Just sounds filling space that had been too quiet too long. Clara sat beside him, adding her own tentative notes. Together, they made something that wasn't music, but wasn't silence either. Outside, the first snow of winter began to fall, covering the burned field. The new addition, the graves on the hill where Margaret lay, covering it all equally, like forgiveness, like hope, like the promise that spring would come whether the bank did or not. In the kitchen, the ledger lay open to Clara's entry, the only entry that mattered now, due June. Dear friend, I need to tell you something about endings. They're never as clean as we want them to be. Clara had her baby a girl, strong lungs, Margaret's middle name. The bank investigation dragged on for 2 years before the ranch was truly theirs. Thomas learned to laugh without checking himself. Pete married the schoolteacher. Jonas went back to Sweden, came back with a bride. Miguel's songs got happier. But here's what I really need you to know. Healing isn't a destination. It's the daily choice to keep going. Clara still dreams of blue babies sometimes. Thomas still reaches for Margaret some mornings before remembering. They built their life anyway, in the spaces between grief and joy, in the kitchen that became the heart of Broken Wheel Ranch. They chose each other, again and again, through drought and plenty, through loss and blessing. That's all any of us can do. This story is a work of fiction, inspired by Western frontier tales, created solely for entertainment purposes. It does not condone, encourage, or promote any form of violence or harmful behavior. All characters and events are products of the author's imagination. Any resemblance to real people or events is purely coincidental.